She thought the gun pointed at her head was the worst thing that could happen that night. She was wrong. The man who walked through that door would terrify her, save her, and destroy every wall she'd ever built, starting with the belief that she didn't deserve to be loved. Welcome back, my wonderful family and friends. If you're tuned in and ready to dive into today's story, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from. Tomorrow, I'll be bringing you another exciting story you definitely don't want to miss. So, let's get started. The apartment was too quiet. Felicia stood in the center of her living room, if you could call it that, and listened to the silence press against her eardrums. Beige walls, beige carpet, a couch she'd bought secondhand that sagged in the middle like it was tired of holding people up. The only pop of color was a wilting succulent on the windowsill that she kept forgetting to water, though it barely needed watering at all. She was failing at keeping alive the one plant designed not to die. She checked her phone. 10:47 p.m. Her stomach growled, sharp and insistent. She'd worked through lunch again, covering for Marcus because he'd asked with that sheepish smile, and she'd said yes because she always said yes. Now the vending machine crackers she'd eaten at 3 p.m. felt like a memory from another lifetime. Felicia opened the Uber app. Her thumb hovered over the screen. The little cars dotted the map like possibilities, each one a small promise that someone would come, that she wouldn't have to walk the 6 blocks to the 24-hour convenience store alone in the dark. You're being ridiculous, she told herself. The 6 blocks. But Charleston at night had teeth. She'd learned that the way you learn anything important, through experience and the stories other women whispered like prayers. Stay visible. Keep your keys between your fingers. Don't make eye contact, but don't look weak. Exist but not too much. She closed the app. Opened it again. The surge pricing glared at her in angry red. $18.50 for a 6-block round trip. Nearly 2 hours of work after taxes. For what? A bottle of water and maybe a sandwich because she was too tired to cook and too broke to order delivery. Felicia locked her phone and grabbed her keys. Invisible women don't get hurt, she reminded herself, pulling on her jacket. Invisible women make it home. 3 miles across the city, Gilbert Mullins stood at the floor-to-ceiling windows of his office on the 42nd floor and watched Charleston glitter beneath him like a jewelry box he owned. And he did own it, or enough of it that the distinction didn't matter. His reflection stared back at him in the glass. Tall, solid, expensive suit tailored to intimidate. Dark hair graying at the temples in a way that added gravitas instead of age. 42 years old, and people crossed the street to avoid asking him for the time. He'd cultivated that, fed it, turned himself into the kind of man people feared before they respected, and respected before they loved. Not that anyone loved him. That was the point. His phone buzzed. He ignored it. Diane, his assistant, his gatekeeper, his human shield, knew better than to call after 10 unless someone was dying or a deal was collapsing. Since neither notification lit up his screen, he let it ring through to voicemail. The office was silent except for the low hum of the air conditioning, a sound so constant he'd stopped hearing it years ago. His desk was clean. No photographs. No personal items. Nothing that suggested a human being worked here instead of a very efficient machine. 8 years. 8 years since he'd let someone pass the walls. 8 years since he'd made the mistake of thinking love was something other than leverage, that vulnerability was anything other than a target on your back. Claire had taught him that lesson thoroughly. He didn't think about her anymore, or he told himself he didn't, which was almost the same thing. What he thought about was the empire he'd built in the aftermath. Mullen Enterprises, real estate, tech investments, a portfolio that made grown men stammer when they pitched to him. Fear was easier than trust. Control was safer than connection. His phone buzzed again. This time, a text from Diane. Security flagged unusual activity at the Westside property. Wanted you to know. Not urgent. Gilbert's jaw tightened. The Westside property, a block of buildings he'd acquired 6 months ago, half of them vacant, the other half full of people paying rent to landlords who'd sold out from under them. He'd planned to renovate. Gentrify, if you wanted to use the word. People spat at him like a curse. He wasn't sentimental about business. Charleston was changing whether people liked it or not. He was just the hand on the wheel. Not urgent, Diane had said, which meant he could ignore it. Go home to his empty penthouse, pour 2 fingers of whiskey he wouldn't taste, and stare at another ceiling until sleep took him somewhere dreamless. But something, instinct, restlessness, the particular brand of insomnia that came from spending 8 years alone, made him grab his keys. The drive would clear his head. And if there was trouble at the property, he'd handle it himself. Gilbert Mullen didn't delegate fear. He drove it. Felicia's sneakers slapped against the sidewalk, each step a small negotiation with her own anxiety. You're fine. The 6 blocks. People do this every day. The convenience store glowed ahead like a lighthouse, its fluorescent lights spilling onto the cracked pavement. Open 24 hours blinked in neon red, and she'd never been so relieved to see corporate signage in her life. The bell chimed as she pushed through the door. Cool air. Bright lights. The bored teenager behind the counter didn't even look up from his phone. Safe. Felicia exhaled and headed for the refrigerated section at the back. She didn't hear the door open behind her. Didn't hear the lock click. Didn't hear anything at all until the voice, rough, desperate, chemical sharp, cut through the hum of the refrigerators. Nobody fucking move. Felicia's ordinary errand has just become a nightmare. And somewhere in the Charleston night, Gilbert Mullen is driving straight toward the moment that will change everything. Have you ever had a normal moment turn into something life-changing in an instant? Drop a comment below. I read every single one. Time didn't stop. That was a lie people told in movies. Time stretched, pulled thin like taffy until every second contained 1,000 smaller seconds, each one sharp enough to cut. Felicia's hand was still on the refrigerator door handle, cold metal against her palm. The water bottle she'd been reaching for sat on the shelf, condensation beating on plastic, impossibly normal. Behind her, she heard the teenage cashier's phone clatter against the counter. I said don't fucking move. The voice cracked on the expletive, young, male, terrified in a way that made him more dangerous, not less. Felicia's body understood before her mind did. Her fingers released the handle. Her hands rose slowly, automatically, palms out in the universal language of I'm not a threat. Please don't hurt me. She turned. Slowly. So slowly. The man was barely a man. 22, maybe 23, with hollow cheeks and eyes that darted like trapped animals. The gun in his hand shook. A revolver, dark and impossibly heavy-looking. The barrel pointed at the cashier whose name tag read Justin, and who looked about 16 and who was crying silently, tears tracking down his young face. Open the register, the gunman said. Open it now, man. I don't want to. Just open it. Justin's hands fumbled at the keys. The register drawer stuck. He pulled harder. Stuck again. I'm trying, Justin whispered. I'm trying, I swear. Try faster. Felicia's heart was a drum. A hammer. A thing trying to break through her ribcage and run away since her legs wouldn't. The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, loud as hornets. She could smell everything. The chemical fake lemon scent of floor cleaner. The hot dog rotating on the warmer near the counter. Her own fear sweat sharp and acrid. Invisible, she thought desperately. Be invisible. That's what you're good at. Just be invisible and maybe... The gunman's eyes cut to her. You, he said. Get over here. Now. Her legs wouldn't move. Couldn't move. They'd become roots. Become concrete. Become anything other than the things that were supposed to carry her across 6 feet of linoleum toward a man with a gun. I said now. She moved. 1 foot. Another. The distance felt like miles. Like walking through water. Like every step was an agreement she was making with the universe. Yes, I could die tonight. Yes, this is how it happens. Yes, I'm that stupid girl who didn't just pay the $18.50 for an Uber. Phone, the gunman said when she was close enough to smell him. Sweat and something chemical, something that made her eyes water. Give me your phone. Her hands were shaking so badly she nearly dropped it. He snatched it from her, shoved it in his pocket. Then his arm snaked around her neck. Not tight enough to choke, but tight enough to trap, and the cold metal of the gun barrel pressed against her temple. Felicia stopped breathing. The world narrowed to that small circle of pressure. Gun metal. Cold. Hard. Real. This is real, she thought, and the thought was so absurd it nearly made her laugh, except laughing might make him pull the trigger, and she wanted, God, she desperately wanted, to keep breathing. I'll kill her, the gunman said to Justin, who had finally gotten the register open and was shoving bills toward him with shaking hands. I swear to God I'll kill her if you hit any alarm. I'll blow her fucking head off right here. Justin made a sound like a wounded animal. I won't, I promise. Just take it. Take all of it. The gun pressed harder against Felicia's temple. She felt her bladder loosen, felt shame flood hot through her body even as terror froze it. Please don't let me die. She prayed to a God she wasn't sure she believed in. Please, I'll be better. I'll be braver. I'll take up more space. I'll call the Uber. I'll do anything. Please. The bell above the door chimed. Gilbert saw three things simultaneously. A kid behind the counter, hands in the air. A man with a gun. A woman with dark hair and wide eyes and a terror so absolute he could taste it from 6 feet away. His body moved before his brain finished cataloging the scene. 8 years of building an empire on ruthlessness had taught him exactly one useful thing about violence. Hesitation got you killed. Let her go. His voice came out flat, cold. The voice that made grown men in boardrooms reconsider their life choices. The gunman's head whipped toward him. The gun stayed pressed to the woman's temple, but his eyes, wild, dilated, desperate, locked on Gilbert. Get the fuck out. Spit flew from his mouth. Get out or I'll kill her. Gilbert didn't move, didn't blink. He'd learned long ago that fear was a language, and the trick was speaking it more fluently than the person trying to scare you. You won't, Gilbert said quietly. I will. I swear to God. You won't, Gilbert repeated, taking one step forward, slow, deliberate. Because the moment you do, there's nothing stopping me from taking that gun and putting you through that window. And you know I will. It wasn't a bluff. They both knew it. The woman, Felicia, though he didn't know her name yet, made a small sound. Not quite a whimper, not quite a plea. Something that cracked through the ice in his chest like a pick through frozen earth. He looked at her, really looked at her. Brown eyes, wide with fear but not empty. There was something fierce underneath the terror, something fighting to survive. Her hands were clenched into fists at her sides even though a gun was pressed to her head. Even now she was fighting. Something in him recognized something in her. Survivor, he thought. She's a survivor. Let her go, Gilbert said again, softer this time, never breaking eye contact with the gunman. Take the money. Walk out. I won't follow. But you let her go first. The silence stretched. The gun barrel shook against Felicia's temple. She closed her eyes. Gilbert's hands flexed at his sides. If the gunman pulled that trigger, if he heard the shot, saw her fall, there was no version of the next 30 seconds where the gunman left the store alive. He knew it with absolute certainty. He would kill him, with his bare hands if necessary. The realization should have scared him. Didn't. Okay, the gunman said suddenly, shoving Felicia forward. She stumbled, caught herself on the counter. Okay, just don't follow me. Don't fucking follow me. He grabbed the cash, back toward the door, gun still raised. The bell chimed. He ran. Silence crashed over the store like a wave. Justin sobbed openly now, sagging against the cigarette display. And Felicia stood frozen at the counter, one hand pressed to her throat where the gunman's arm had been, staring at Gilbert like he was a ghost, or a monster, or something she couldn't quite name. You're safe, Gilbert said, and his voice came out rougher than he intended. You're safe now. She opened her mouth, closed it, then her legs gave out. Gilbert moved without thinking, catching her before she hit the ground, and the moment his arms closed around her. This stranger, this woman whose name he didn't know, something shifted in the architecture of his chest. Something he'd thought was dead. Something that felt dangerously like feeling. Gilbert Mullen just saved Felicia's life, but why does holding her feel more dangerous than facing down an armed robber? And why can't he let go? When was the last time a stranger showed you unexpected kindness? Share your story below. Was shaking. Not the small tremor of cold or nervousness, but the full-body earthquake of shock, her teeth chattering, her hands vibrating against her thighs, her breath coming in shallow gasps that wouldn't deepen no matter how hard she tried. She was sitting on the curb outside the convenience store. She didn't remember walking there. Didn't remember Gilbert, that was his name, the police officer had said it, Gilbert Mullen, guiding her outside while Justin called 911. The night air was warm, but she was freezing. Ice in her veins. Winter in her bones. Here, a suit jacket settled over her shoulders, heavy and expensive and smelling like cedar and something darker. Bergamot, maybe, or just money. She looked up. Gilbert stood over her, shirt sleeves rolled to his elbows now, his expression unreadable. In the flashing red and blue lights of the police cars, he looked carved from stone, all sharp angles and controlled power. "I'm fine," Felicia said automatically. The lie tasted like copper. "I'm fine, you don't have to. You're in shock." His voice was flat, factual, not unkind but not warm either. "Keep the jacket." He moved to step away. Her hand shot out, grabbed his wrist. She released it immediately, horrified at herself, at the desperate need that had made her reach for a complete stranger. "I'm sorry," she whispered. "I don't know why I." "Don't apologize." Gilbert's jaw tightened. He crouched down so they were eye level, and this close she could see his eyes weren't just dark. They were deep brown, almost black, with tiny flecks of amber that caught the light. "You nearly died tonight. You're allowed to fall apart." "I'm not falling apart." But her voice cracked on the words, betraying her. His expression shifted. Something flickered across his face too fast to name. Then it was gone, the mask sliding back into place. He stood, putting distance between them. "The police need your statement," he said, nodding toward the officer approaching them. "I'll wait." "You don't have to." "I'll wait." It wasn't a kindness. It was an order. And Felicia was too tired, too broken, too grateful to argue. Gilbert told himself he was staying because it was the responsible thing to do. He was a witness. The police needed his statement too. It made sense to wait to make sure the woman, Felicia Martin, the officer had said, 28, works at an insurance firm downtown, got home safely. That was just basic human decency. It had nothing to do with the way she'd looked at him when he'd caught her, like he was a life raft, like he was salvation. It had nothing to do with the fact that his hands still remembered the shape of her, small-boned and trembling and alive in a way that had made something in his chest constrict painfully. He didn't do this, didn't get involved, didn't let strangers become anything other than strangers. But he couldn't leave. "Mr. Mullen?" A detective approached, mid-50s, tired eyes, a wedding ring worn thin from years of wear. "I'm Detective Ramos. I need to ask you a few questions about what happened." Gilbert nodded, gave his statement in clear, concise sentences. Yes, he'd entered the store. Yes, he'd seen the perpetrator holding Ms. Martin hostage. No, he hadn't felt threatened, a lie but a useful one. Yes, he'd acted to de-escalate. No, he hadn't touched the perpetrator. No, he didn't get a good look at the gun. Another lie, he'd memorized every detail, but involving himself further wasn't the goal. "You're lucky," Ramos said, closing his notebook. "Could have gone very differently. Luck had nothing to do with it." Gilbert's voice was cold. Ramos studied him for a long moment. "You got a hero complex, Mr. Mullen?" "No." Gilbert's answer was immediate. "I happened to be there. That's all." But even as he said it, his eyes drifted to where Felicia sat wrapped in his jacket, giving her own statement to a female officer who kept touching her shoulder gently, kindly, in a way that made Gilbert's hands curl into fists. He didn't have a hero complex. He just couldn't stomach the thought of that gun going off. Couldn't stomach the thought of her blood on that floor. "Stop," he told himself. "Stop thinking about her. You did what anyone would do. Now walk away." But his feet stayed planted. "Do you have someone we can call?" Officer Chun asked Felicia gently. "Family? A friend? You shouldn't be alone tonight." Felicia's mind went blank. Her parents were in Florida, retired, living their best lives without the burden of their chronically disappointing daughter. Her friends. Did she have friends? Co-workers she had lunch with sometimes. Sure. Acquaintances who liked her Instagram posts. But someone she could call at midnight? Someone who would drop everything to sit with her in the aftermath of trauma? No. The realization sat in her stomach like a stone. "I'm fine," she said again, and the words were becoming a mantra. A spell, a desperate incantation. I'll call an Uber. The irony would have been funny if she wasn't so broken. Ms. Martin. I'm fine. She wasn't fine. She was the opposite of fine. She was a woman who'd had a gun pressed to her head an hour ago, and whose hands still wouldn't stop shaking, and who couldn't remember how to breathe correctly. But admitting she was alone, admitting she had no one, felt like a different kind of death. "I'll take her home." Gilbert's voice cut through her spiraling thoughts. He stood a few feet away, hands in his pockets, expression neutral, like he was offering to review a contract, not drive a traumatized stranger across the city. "Oh no," Felicia said quickly. "No, you've done enough. You've done too much. I can't. You're not calling an Uber at 1 in the morning after what just happened." His tone left no room for argument. "I'll take you home. Make sure you're safe." Officer Chun looked between them. "Mr. Mullen, are you sure? We can arrange." "I'm sure." Felicia wanted to argue, wanted to insist she was capable, independent, fine. But the truth was she was terrified. Terrified of getting in a stranger's car. Terrified of going home alone to her too quiet apartment. Terrified of closing her eyes and seeing that gun. Feeling that metal against her temple, hearing that voice. "I'll blow her fucking head off right here." And Gilbert, this man she didn't know, this billionaire the officer had called by name with a note of deference bordering on fear, was the only solid thing in a world that had turned liquid and dangerous. "Okay," she whispered. Something flickered across his face. Relief? No, that didn't make sense. "My car's this way," he said, already walking. Felicia stood on shaking legs, his jacket still around her shoulders, and followed. She didn't see Officer Chun exchange a look with Detective Ramos. Didn't hear Ramos mutter, "That's Gilbert Mullen. Guy's a shark. Never seen him so much as jaywalk, let alone play bodyguard." Didn't hear Chun reply, "Maybe he's human after all." All Felicia knew was that when Gilbert opened the passenger door of his black Mercedes, leather seats, new car smell, a luxury she'd never experienced, she got in without hesitation. The man who'd saved her life felt safer than the entire rest of the world, and that terrified her almost as much as the gun had. The drive was silent. Gilbert kept his eyes on the road, his hands at 10 and 2, his jaw tight enough to crack teeth. He didn't know what he was doing. Didn't know why he'd volunteered to drive her home when he should have, walked away the moment the police arrived. She was a complication, a liability, a woman who would remember his face, his name, who would connect him to this night in ways that could become messy. But every time he considered dropping her at her building and driving away forever, he remembered the weight of her in his arms. The way she'd looked at him, really looked, past the reputation, past the fear everyone else felt, and seen something worth trusting. No one had looked at him like that in 8 years. "Turn left here," Felicia said quietly. Her voice was hoarse. "The building with the green awning." He pulled to the curb. The neighborhood was decent but not good, the kind of place where people worked hard to stay afloat and mostly succeeded. Her building was old, probably rent-controlled, the kind of place developers like him bought and renovated and made unaffordable. Gilbert put the car in park. Didn't turn off the engine. "Thank you," Felicia said, already reaching for the door handle. "For everything. For saving my life. For the ride. Keep the jacket." She looked down at the suit jacket still wrapped around her shoulders. "I can't. You're still shaking." His voice was harder than he intended. "Keep it." Their eyes met, held. "Who are you?" she asked softly. The question landed like a punch. Who are you? Not what do you do, not what's your net worth, not are you the Gilbert Mullen who owns half of Charleston and has a reputation for destroying anyone who gets in his way. Who are you? He didn't have an answer. Someone who was in the wrong place at the right time, he said finally. I don't believe that. She was still looking at him with those two seeing eyes. You walked into that store like you weren't afraid of anything. Like you've done it before. I haven't. Then why did you? Because I couldn't walk away. Because something about you, your fear, your strength, the way you kept fighting even with a gun to your head, made me remember what it feels like to care if someone lives or dies. I don't know, he said. She studied him for another long moment, then nodded. Okay. She got out of the car. He watched her walk to her building, watched her unlock the door, watched her turn at the threshold and raise one hand in a small wave. Then she was gone. Gilbert sat in his car for 5 full minutes, engine running, hands gripping the steering wheel. Then he drove home to his empty penthouse and poured 3 fingers of whiskey and told himself this was the end of it. He'd saved a woman's life. That was all. He wouldn't think about her again. Both of them are running from what they felt tonight, but some connections refuse to be forgotten. Neither of them knows that fate isn't done with them yet. Have you ever met someone who changed your life in a single moment? Let me know in the comments. Felicia didn't sleep. She lay in her bed, still wearing yesterday's clothes, Gilbert's jacket draped over her like a blanket because she couldn't bring herself to take it off, and stared at the ceiling. Every time she closed her eyes, she was back in that store, gun to her head, chemical smell of fear, the certainty that she was going to die on dirty linoleum under fluorescent lights. But then Gilbert, walking through that door like an avenging angel. No, not an angel. Angels were soft, benevolent. Gilbert had been all sharp edges and controlled violence. A man who'd looked at an armed robber and hadn't blinked. Let her go. 2 words in a voice like winter, and she'd felt the shift in the air, the moment the gunman had realized he wasn't the most dangerous person in the room anymore. At 6 a.m., Felicia gave up on sleep. She made coffee with shaking hands, burned her tongue on the first sip, and tried to construct a plan for normalcy. Work. She'd go to work, sit at her desk, answer emails, pretend the world hadn't tilted sideways. Then she reached for her phone that wasn't there. Her phone that the gunman had taken, shoved in his pocket, carried away into the Charleston night along with $200 and her illusion that she was safe in her own city. Shit, she whispered. No phone meant no work emails, no alarm, no GPS, no contact with the outside world. In 2024, it meant being erased. She'd have to go to the police station, file paperwork, get a report for insurance, face the fluorescent lights and kind officers and the statement she'd have to give again, every detail a small violence. Felicia pulled Gilbert's jacket tighter around her shoulders, and caught his scent, cedar and bergamot and something uniquely him. Her chest constricted. Stop, she told herself. He's a stranger who did a good thing. That's all. But her hands were already reaching for her laptop, fingers typing before her brain caught up. Gilbert Mullen Charleston. Gilbert hadn't slept either. He tried, poured the whiskey, stood at his windows watching the city, gone through all the usual rituals that preceded his usual 4 hours of restless unconsciousness. Nothing worked. He kept seeing her face, kept feeling the weight of her in his arms, kept hearing that small sound she'd made. Not quite fear, not quite relief, something in between that had reached into his chest and squeezed. At 7 a.m., he gave up and went to his home gym, ran 5 miles on the treadmill, lifted weights until his muscles screamed, punished his body for the weakness his mind was showing. It didn't help. By 9 a.m., he was in his office, showered and suited and trying to focus on the development deal that needed his signature. The papers sat on his desk, unread. His assistant had brought coffee an hour ago. It sat cooling, untouched. His computer screen showed the security footage from the Westside property. The convenience store break-in had happened at one of his buildings. His building, which meant he'd review the footage, identify any liability, handle it with the ruthless efficiency he was known for. He clicked play, watched himself walk into the frame, watched the gunman spin, watched Felicia, small and terrified and so damn brave, stand frozen with a gun to her head. Gilbert's hands curled into fists. He watched himself negotiate, watched the gunman run, watched himself catch Felicia as she fell. And then he watched something he hadn't seen in the moment. The way she'd looked at him. The way her hands had clutched his shirt. The way she'd held on like he was the only solid thing in a collapsing world. The way he'd held her back. His intercom buzzed. "Mr. Mullen? Detective Ramos is here to see you. He doesn't have an appointment, but he says it's about last night." Gilbert closed the security footage. "Send him in." "Mr. Mullen." Ramos entered without preamble, settling into the chair across from Gilbert's desk without waiting for an invitation. "Thanks for seeing me. I assume you caught him." Gilbert's voice was flat. "Not yet, but we will." Ramos pulled out his notebook. "I wanted to follow up on a few details, and to let you know, Ms. Martin's phone is still missing. The perpetrator likely ditched it, but we're tracking it. Should have a location by end of day." Something in Gilbert's chest tightened. She needs that phone. Most people do these days. Ramos studied him. "You know, it's interesting. I've been a detective for 23 years. Worked maybe 200 armed robberies. And I can count on one hand the number of times a bystander walked toward a gun instead of running away from it. Is there a question in there? Just an observation." Ramos smiled thinly. "You're either very brave or very stupid, Mr. Mullen. And you don't strike me as stupid." "I'm not brave either. I'm practical." Gilbert's jaw tightened. He wasn't going to shoot. His hands were shaking. He was high, desperate. Those types want money and escape, not murder charges. "And if you were wrong?" Gilbert didn't answer. Couldn't answer. Because the truth was he hadn't known. Hadn't calculated the risk. Had just moved. Instinct, adrenaline, and something deeper he didn't want to name. "Ms. Martin asked about you," Ramos said casually. "Wanted to know how to contact you." "To thank you properly," she said. Gilbert's pulse jumped. He kept his expression neutral. "That's not necessary. I didn't give her your information, of course. Privacy and all that." Ramos stood, tucked his notebook away. "But she seemed pretty determined. Wouldn't be surprised if she found you anyway. You're not exactly hard to Google." After Ramos left, Gilbert sat motionless at his desk. She'd asked about him, wanted to contact him, which meant she was thinking about him too, which meant last night hadn't been just trauma bonding and shock, which meant, stop. He had work, deals, an empire that didn't build itself. He didn't have time for a woman he'd known for less than 2 hours. No matter how her eyes had looked in the flashing police lights, no matter how right she'd felt in his arms. His phone rang. "Diane." "Mr. Mullen, there's a woman here to see you. No appointment. She says her name is Felicia Martin." Gilbert's heart stopped, then slammed back to life harder than before. "Send her in," he said. Felicia had Googled him. She'd found articles, headlines, photos of Gilbert Mullen in designer suits at charity galas. Gilbert Mullen closing real estate deals worth millions. Gilbert Mullen staring down the camera with eyes that revealed nothing. Charleston's most feared billionaire, one headline declared. Ruthless developer displaces families for profit, said another. Mullen Enterprises expands empire, read a third, accompanied by a photo of him looking cold and perfect and utterly untouchable. This was the man who'd saved her life. This was the man whose jacket she'd slept in. This was the man whose office she was currently standing in. 42 floors above Charleston, surrounded by glass and steel and money, feeling completely out of place in her wrinkled work clothes and yesterday's fear. "Ms. Martin." His voice came from behind her. She turned. Gilbert stood in the doorway of an inner office, perfectly composed in a charcoal suit that probably cost more than her monthly rent. His expression was unreadable, controlled. The man from last night, the one who'd caught her, who'd waited with her, who'd driven her home, was gone. This was the billionaire, the empire builder, the stranger. "I'm sorry for barging in," Felicia said, hating how small her voice sounded in this massive space. I wanted to thank you, properly. And I didn't have your number. And I know this is probably completely inappropriate, but you're here about your phone." She blinked. "What? Your phone? The detective told me it's missing." He moved past her into the office, keeping careful distance between them. I have contacts. I can have it tracked, recovered by tonight. That's not why I'm here. Then why are you here, Ms. Martin? The formality of her name in his mouth felt like a slap. Last night he'd held her while she shook. This morning he was treating her like a stranger. Maybe that's all she was. I wanted to thank you, she said again, lifting her chin, for saving my life, for being kind when you didn't have to be, she gestured helplessly, for everything. You've thanked me. Consider it done. His voice was cold, dismissive. Was there anything else? Yes, she wanted to scream. Who are you? Why did you look at me like I mattered? Why did holding me feel like coming home? Why can't I stop thinking about you? Instead she said, I brought your jacket. She held it out. He didn't take it. Keep it. I can't keep a jacket that probably costs more than my car. Then donate it. He turned away, moved to his desk. If that's all, why are you doing this? The words burst out before she could stop them. Last night you were kind. You were human. And now you're treating me like I'm an inconvenience. You're not an inconvenience, Ms. Martin. You're a woman I helped in a bad situation. That's all. His back was to her, shoulders rigid. I'm glad you're safe. But there's nothing more to discuss. The dismissal was clear. Brutal. Felicia felt something crack in her chest. Shame flooded hot through her veins. Of course this was all it was to him. A good deed. A story he'd tell at dinner parties. I once saved a woman from an armed robbery. No, it was nothing. She was nothing. Just like she'd always been. Right? She said, her voice brittle. Of course. I'm sorry for wasting your time. She turned to leave. Felicia. Her name in his voice, her first name rough and raw, stopped her in her tracks. She looked back. Gilbert was standing at the window, hands in his pockets, jaw tight. When he spoke, his voice was quieter, strained. You're not a waste of time. That's the problem. The words hung in the air between them. I don't understand, she whispered. He turned to face her, and the look in his eyes, dark and haunted and wanting, made her breath catch. I don't do this, he said. I don't let people in. I don't connect. I built a very successful life on keeping everyone at arm's length. His hands flexed. And then you looked at me last night like I was a hero instead of a monster. Like I was someone worth trusting. And I haven't been able to stop thinking about it. About you. Felicia's heart was thundering. Gilbert, I need you to leave. The words sounded torn from him. Because if you stay, I'm going to do something we'll both regret. I'm going to ask you to have coffee with me. I'm going to want to know everything about you. And that, his voice cracked. That's not who I am anymore. What if I want to stay? Silence. The air between them was electric. Dangerous. You don't know what you're asking, Gilbert said finally. Then tell me. Felicia took a step toward him. Then another. Tell me why Charleston's most feared billionaire is afraid of having coffee with me. His laugh was hollow. Because the last time I let someone close, she destroyed me. And I swore I'd never give anyone that power again. I'm not her. I know. His eyes held hers. That's what terrifies me. The confession hung between them, raw, honest, vulnerable. Felicia's hands were shaking again, but not from fear this time. One coffee, she said softly. Just one. And if you still want me to leave after that, I will. But you saved my life, Gilbert. The least you can do is let me buy you a cup of coffee. He stared at her for a long moment. She watched the war play out across his face. Walls versus want, safety versus risk, 8 years of isolation versus one woman who'd somehow slipped past his defenses in a single night. One coffee, he said finally, and Felicia smiled for the first time since a gun had been pressed to her head. They've agreed to one coffee, but both of them know it's already too late. The connection that started in terror is about to become something neither of them can control. The coffee shop Gilbert chose wasn't the kind of place Felicia expected. No trendy downtown cafe with exposed brick and overpriced lattes. Instead, he'd driven them to a small place in an older neighborhood. The kind with mismatched chairs, local art on the walls, and a barista who greeted regulars by name. The kind of place that felt lived in. Real. You come here often? Felicia asked as they settled into a corner table, away from the morning crowd. Every Sunday for 8 years. Gilbert wrapped his hands around his black coffee. No sugar, no cream, nothing to soften it. The owner, Maria, doesn't care who I am, doesn't read the business section, just makes good coffee and minds her business. So this is where Charleston's most feared billionaire hides. His mouth quirked. Not quite a smile, but close. The headline writers love drama. Makes for better clicks than local developer drinks coffee like normal human. Are you a normal human? Depends on who you ask. He took a sip, watching her over the rim. The people I've displaced probably have opinions. The investors I've made wealthy think I'm a genius. The truth is somewhere in the middle. Felicia cupped her chai latte. Extra foam, cinnamon on top, sweet enough to be dessert, and studied him. In the natural light of the coffee shop, he looked different. Softer somehow. The hard edges were still there, but she could see past them now. Could see the exhaustion in the lines around his eyes, the tension he carried in his shoulders. Why did you really walk into that store? She asked quietly. Gilbert was silent for a long moment. Then, I was restless. Couldn't sleep. Thought driving would clear my head. That's not an answer. It's the only one I have. He set down his cup. I don't make a habit of heroics, if that's what you're asking. I'm not a good man, Felicia. I buy buildings and displace families because the numbers make sense. I fire people who don't perform. I make decisions that prioritize profit over people because that's what business is. But you saved me. That was different. Why? He looked away, jaw tight. Because you were there. Because I could. Because, he stopped, started again. Because for 30 seconds, I had a choice between walking away and doing something that mattered. And I'm tired of only doing things that matter to my bank account. The confession landed between them like something fragile. You're lonelier than I am, Felicia said softly. Aren't you? His eyes snapped to hers. What makes you say that? Because I recognize it. She traced the rim of her cup, gathering courage. I don't have anyone either. No one to call at midnight. No one who'd notice if I disappeared for a week. I spent my whole life trying to take up less space, be less trouble, need less from people. And it worked. I'm so good at being invisible that I actually became it. Felicia, when that gun was against my head, she continued, her voice steady despite the tears burning her eyes. My first thought wasn't, I don't want to die. It was, at least someone will notice I'm gone. How pathetic is that? That I needed a gun to my head to feel like I mattered enough for someone to care. Gilbert's expression cracked. That's not pathetic. That's... He ran a hand through his hair, the first uncontrolled gesture she'd seen from him. Fuck, that's heartbreaking. Yeah, well, she smiled, but it wobbled. Welcome to my therapy session. Sorry, you just asked for coffee, not my life story. I want your life story. The words came out fierce, certain. All of it. Every piece you're willing to share. Something in Felicia's chest unfurled. Bloomed. Okay, she whispered. But then you have to tell me yours. Fair trade. She told him about growing up the middle child of 5. Lost in the shuffle, never quite loud enough to be noticed, never quite troublesome enough to warrant attention. About learning early that love was a limited resource. Something her parents parceled out to the siblings who demanded it while she quietly faded into the wallpaper. I became the easy one, she said, stirring her latte even though it didn't need stirring. The one who didn't complain, who didn't ask for help, who solved her own problems. And my parents, they didn't mean to ignore me. They were just tired, overwhelmed. And I made it so easy for them to forget I needed things too. Gilbert listened without interrupting, his dark eyes never leaving her face. It followed me everywhere, Felicia continued. School, friendships, relationships. I kept waiting for someone to see me without me having to beg for it. To choose me without me having to convince them I was worth choosing. It never happened. Your ex, Gilbert said. It wasn't a question. She nodded. Evan. 3 years. He was fine. We were fine. But fine isn't love, you know? Fine is settling. And I was so good at settling that I didn't even realize I was doing it. Until one day he came home and said he'd met someone else. Someone more exciting. More. She laughed bitterly. More there. And I couldn't even be angry because he was right. I was barely there. I'd spent 3 years making myself smaller for him, and he still couldn't see me. He was an idiot. The vehemence in Gilbert's voice startled her, made something warm pool in her chest. Maybe, she said, but he wasn't wrong. I gave him nothing to see. That's not your fault. Gilbert leaned forward, intensity radiating from him. You're not responsible for other people's blindness. You're not. He stopped, closed his eyes. Sorry, this is hitting close to home. Your turn, Felicia said gently. Fair trade, remember? Gilbert hadn't talked about Claire in 8 years. Hadn't said her name out loud. Hadn't let himself think about the way she'd smiled when she said she loved him, or the way that smile had twisted into something cruel when she'd revealed the truth. But sitting across from Felicia, this woman who just handed him her pain like a gift, like trust, he found the words coming anyway. Her name was Claire, he said. We met at a charity gala. She was an artist, vibrant, passionate, everything I wasn't. I fell hard and fast, which should have been my first warning. I don't do anything fast. Felicia waited, patient. We got engaged after a year. I thought. His hands clenched around his cup. I thought I'd found it. The thing everyone talks about. Partnership. Love. Someone who saw past the money and the reputation to the person underneath. She didn't. No. The word came out flat. She saw an opportunity. Turns out she'd been feeding information to my biggest competitor the entire time we were together. Business plans. Acquisition targets. Private conversations. Everything I told her in bed, she sold the next morning. Felicia's sharp inhale told him she understood the betrayal's magnitude. The day I found out, I just bought an engagement ring. Diamond. Obscenely expensive. I came home to surprise her. Gilbert's laugh was hollow. Found her on the phone with Marcus Chun, my rival, laughing about how easy I'd been to manipulate, how the cold billionaire had melted like butter for a pretty face and a convincing I love you. Gilbert. She cost me $100 million in deals that year. But that's not what broke me. He finally met Felicia's eyes. What broke me was realizing I'd been so desperate to be loved that I'd ignored every red flag. I'd handed her all my vulnerabilities and she'd used them as weapons. So I decided never again. Never again would I be that weak. Never again would I give anyone that power. That's not weakness, Felicia said fiercely. That's not. I built walls, Felicia. Made myself into exactly what the headlines say. The feared billionaire. The ruthless developer. The man who doesn't feel anything because feeling is dangerous. He set down his cup, his hands trembling slightly. And it worked. For 8 years it worked. I was safe, successful, untouchable. Until last night. Until last night, he agreed. Until I walked into that store and saw you and something in those walls cracked. You looked at me like I was someone worth trusting. And I haven't been able to shake it. Can't shake you. The silence stretched between them, thick with unspoken things. We're both broken, Felicia said finally. Aren't we? Completely. Maybe that's okay. She reached across the table, her hand hovering near his, not quite touching. An offer. Maybe broken people are allowed to find each other. Maybe we're allowed to be seen. Gilbert looked at her hand, at her face, at the vulnerability and strength existing simultaneously in her expression. Then he took her hand. The contact was electric, simple, her palm against his, fingers intertwining. Two people who'd forgotten what it felt like to be touched with kindness. I don't know how to do this, he admitted. Don't know how to let someone in without expecting them to destroy me. I don't know how to be seen without expecting to be abandoned, Felicia said. So I guess we're both terrified. Completely terrified. Want to be terrified together? Gilbert's grip tightened on her hand. And for the first time in 8 years, he smiled, really smiled, the expression transforming his face from stone to something startlingly human. Yeah, he said. Yeah, I do. They stayed in that coffee shop for 3 hours. Talked about everything and nothing. Felicia told him about her job. Insurance claims, endless paperwork, a boss who never remembered her name. Gilbert told her about the West Side Project, the guilt he carried about displacement, the way business felt increasingly hollow. She made him laugh, actually laugh, with a story about her coworker Marcus's disastrous attempts at office romance. He made her blush when he said quietly that she had the most expressive eyes he'd ever seen. And slowly, incrementally, the walls came down. Not completely, not yet, but enough. Enough for Gilbert to realize he wanted more of this. More of her. More of feeling human instead of functioning as a corporation in a suit. Enough for Felicia to realize that being seen, truly seen, didn't make her vulnerable. It made her real. When they finally left, the afternoon sun was slanting golden through the streets. Gilbert walked her to his car, and neither of them mentioned that they didn't want this to end. Can I see you again? He asked. Not as a thank you. Not because of what happened. Just because I want to. Felicia's smile was radiant. Yes. Tomorrow. Tomorrow. He opened her car door, and before she got in, she stood on her toes and kissed his cheek. Quick, soft, terrifying. Gilbert stood frozen, his hand coming up to touch the spot where her lips had been. Thank you, Felicia said. For coffee. And for... She gestured helplessly. For this. For seeing me. Felicia. He caught her hand before she could pull away. You're impossible not to see. She got in the car. He drove her home. And when he pulled up to her building, neither of them moved to leave. Tomorrow, he said again. Tomorrow, she agreed. But as she walked into her building, Gilbert's phone buzzed. A text from Detective Ramos. Found the perpetrator. He's talking. Says he wasn't working alone. Need to speak with you and Ms. Martin ASAP. There's more to last night than we thought. Gilbert's blood ran cold. The robbery hadn't been random, and Felicia was still in danger. Just when Gilbert and Felicia have opened their hearts, a new threat emerges. The robbery wasn't random, and someone is still targeting Felicia. Gilbert will have to choose. Retreat to safety or fight for the woman who's brought him back to life. What do you think is really going on? Drop your theories in the comments. I love reading your thoughts. Gilbert took the stairs to Felicia's apartment 2 at a time. His heart was a drum, his mind racing through possibilities. None of them good. A targeted robbery. Someone who'd known she'd be there. Someone who wanted something from her or wanted to send a message or... He forced himself to slow down, to think like the strategist he was instead of the terrified man he was becoming. The gunman had taken her phone specifically, had grabbed it first before the money, had kept it. Why? Gilbert reached her floor, found her door, and knocked. Hard. Felicia. It's Gilbert. Open the door. Silence. His pulse spiked. He knocked again, harder. Felicia. The door opened a crack, chain still attached. Her face appeared. Confused, concerned, still soft from their afternoon together. Gilbert? What? Pack a bag. His voice came out harsher than intended. Right now. You're coming with me. Her eyes widened. What? Why? Because the robbery wasn't random. He kept his voice low, urgent. The detective called. The gunman was hired. Someone paid him to be in that store to target you specifically. And until we know who and why, you're not safe here. The color drained from her face. That doesn't make sense. I'm nobody. You're not nobody. The words came out fierce. And someone thinks you have something they want, or know something they don't want you to know. Either way, you're in danger. So please, his voice cracked. Please let me help you. She stared at him for a long moment. Then the chain rattled and the door opened fully. Okay, she whispered. Okay. 20 minutes later, they were in Gilbert's car, Felicia's hastily packed duffel in the back seat. driving through Charleston as the sun set in streaks of orange and gold. "Where are we going?" she asked. Her hands were twisted in her lap, knuckles white. "Somewhere safe. Somewhere no one will think to look." Gilbert's jaw was tight, his eyes constantly checking the mirrors. "My family has a house on Edisto Island. Beach property. Private. No one knows about it except—" He stopped. "No one knows about it. We'll be safe there." "Gilbert, this is insane. I can't just disappear. I have work tomorrow. I called your office. Told them you had a family emergency." He glanced at her. "I hope that's okay. I know I'm overstepping, but you called my work?" She didn't sound angry, just stunned. "I called a lot of people. Detective Ramos is putting protection on your apartment. I have my head of security reviewing all footage from that night, tracking down connections." His hands tightened on the wheel. "I'm not letting anything happen to you, Felicia. Not again." "Why?" The question came out soft. "You barely know me." Gilbert was quiet for a long moment. The city gave way to highway to back roads, civilization to stretches of lowcountry marsh and twisted oak trees. "Because," he said finally, "for 8 years I haven't cared if I lived or died. I got up, went to work, made money, went home. Repeat. I was functioning, not living. And then I met you. And for the first time in 8 years, I'm terrified. Not of dying, of losing something before I've even had a chance to figure out what it is." Tears pricked Felicia's eyes. "Gilbert, you don't have to say anything. I know this is fast. Insane even. We've known each other for 36 hours. But he took a shaking breath. "I need you safe. That's not negotiable." Felicia reached across the console and took his hand. He startled at the contact. Then his fingers curled around hers. Tight, almost desperate. They drove the rest of the way in silence, hands intertwined. The beach house was beautiful. Not ostentatious. Not a billionaire's showpiece. Just a weathered gray cottage with white shutters and a wraparound porch, nestled in the dunes with the Atlantic stretching endless beyond it. "This was my grandmother's," Gilbert said as he unlocked the door. "She left it to me when she died. I haven't been here in," he paused, "5 years. Maybe 6. "Why not?" Felicia asked, following him inside. The interior was simple but warm. Hardwood floors, white walls, furniture covered in sheets that Gilbert began pulling off, revealing comfortable couches and worn armchairs that looked actually sat in. "Because it's full of good memories," Gilbert said quietly. "And after Claire, I didn't want good memories. Didn't trust them. Thought they'd just make the bad ones hurt more." He moved through the house systematically, checking windows, locking doors, turning on lights. Felicia watched him. This man who'd become a fortress, seeing the cracks more clearly now, seeing the boy who'd loved his grandmother, the man who'd been wounded so deeply he'd buried himself alive. "You can take the master bedroom," Gilbert said, not meeting her eyes. "I'll sleep on the couch. There's food in the pantry, canned goods, pasta. I'll make us something." "Gilbert." He stopped, turned. "Thank you," she said, "for this, for protecting me, for—" she gestured helplessly, "for caring." Something in his expression crumbled. "I can't not care. Believe me, I tried." They made dinner together. It should have been awkward, this strange intimacy, cooking side by side in a kitchen that smelled like salt air and old wood. But it wasn't. Gilbert found pasta and Jared sauce. Felicia discovered bread and olive oil. They moved around each other with unexpected ease, bodies learning the dance of shared space. "Can you cook?" Felicia asked, watching him expertly mince garlic. "My grandmother taught me. She said a man who couldn't feed himself was helpless, and Mullins weren't helpless." He smiled small, sad. "She was formidable. 5 feet tall and terrifying. Ran a restaurant for 40 years. She sounds amazing." She was. He added the garlic to the pan, the sizzle filling the kitchen. "She's the one who taught me that money doesn't make you powerful. Character does. I forgot that for a while. Built an empire on everything she'd hate." "I don't think that's true." Gilbert looked at her, surprised. "You walked into danger to save a stranger." Felicia said. You're protecting me now, even though you barely know me. You gave your assistant grief for not knowing my situation. She stepped closer. You're not the monster the headlines make you out to be, Gilbert. You're just someone who got hurt and built walls. But walls aren't character. What you do when they come down, that's character. He stared at her. Then, slowly, deliberately, he set down the wooden spoon and closed the distance between them. I'm going to kiss you, he said, his voice rough. If you don't want that, tell me now. Felicia's breath caught. I want that. You're sure? Because once I start, I don't know if I can. She rose on her toes and kissed him. Gilbert made a sound, half surprise, half relief, and his arms came around her, pulling her close. The kiss was gentle at first, tentative, two people learning the shape of each other. Then it deepened, became something desperate and real and necessary. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Gilbert rested his forehead against hers. I'm terrified, he whispered. Me too. What if I mess this up? What if we both do? Felicia's hands fisted in his shirt. What if we mess it up and try anyway? What if we're allowed to be imperfect and scared and still worth loving? Gilbert pulled back just enough to look at her. Worth loving, he repeated, like testing the words. Worth loving, she confirmed. He kissed her again, softer this time. Reverent. The pasta's burning, Felicia murmured against his lips. I don't care. She laughed. Actually laughed. And the sound filled the kitchen with something bright and fragile and beautiful. They saved the pasta, ate dinner on the porch with the ocean roaring beyond the dunes, stars emerging one by one in the darkening sky. Gilbert told her about his grandmother's restaurant, the Sunday dinners, the way she'd ruled the kitchen like a general commanded an army. Felicia told him about the one time she tried to cook Thanksgiving dinner for her family, had worked for 2 days, burned the turkey, and served it anyway while her siblings mocked her. She'd cried in the bathroom, and no one had noticed she was gone. They didn't deserve you, Gilbert said fiercely. Maybe. Or maybe I didn't know how to ask for what I deserved. You shouldn't have to ask. Love isn't something you beg for. It's something freely given, or it's not love at all. Felicia set down her wine glass. Is that what this is? Love? The question hung in the salt air. Gilbert was quiet for a long time. Then, I don't know. It's been so long since I felt anything close to it that I can't tell the difference between love and just feeling. But whatever this is, it's the most real thing I've experienced in 8 years. That's enough, Felicia said softly. For now, that's enough. Later, after the dishes were done and the house was locked tight, Gilbert walked Felicia to the master bedroom. You're sure you don't want me to take the couch? She asked. I'm sure. He paused at the threshold. Get some sleep. If you need anything. Gilbert. She caught his hand. Stay. Just not for anything else. Just stay. I don't want to be alone tonight. He should have said no. Should have maintained distance, propriety, the careful boundaries they'd already obliterated. Instead he said, okay. They lay on top of the covers, fully clothed, careful space between them. The ocean was a constant rhythm through the open window. The darkness was complete except for the moon painting silver across the floor. Tell me something true, Felicia whispered. Like what? Anything. Something no one else knows. Gilbert was silent. Then, I'm afraid I'll wake up tomorrow and this will have been a dream. That you'll disappear like everything good in my life eventually does. I'm not going anywhere. You can't promise that. No, she agreed. But I can promise I'll try. That I'll fight to stay. That you, her voice caught. That you're worth fighting for. Gilbert reached across the space between them and took her hand. They fell asleep like that. Fingers intertwined, two broken people choosing to be vulnerable, choosing to trust that maybe, just maybe, the worst moments could lead to the most beautiful lives. Neither of them saw the car that pulled up to the end of the beach road an hour later. Neither of them saw the figure that stepped out, raised binoculars, and stared at the cottage for a long, calculating moment. Neither of them knew that the danger wasn't over. It had only just begun. For one perfect night, Gilbert and Felicia found peace in each other. But someone knows where they are, and whatever they want from Felicia, they're not giving up. The fragile bond they've built is about to be tested by fire. Felicia woke to an empty bed and the smell of coffee. For a disoriented moment, she didn't remember where she was. Then it came back. The beach house, Gilbert, the way he'd held her hand through the night like she was something precious instead of invisible. She smiled and stretched, then noticed the voices drifting from the living room. Gilbert's voice, low and tense. "I don't care what it costs. Find out who hired him and why. I want names, addresses, everything." Pause. He was on the phone. "No, she doesn't know anything," I asked. "She has no idea why anyone would target her." Another pause. "Just do your job, Marcus. That's what I pay you for." Felicia got up quietly, moved to the doorway. Gilbert stood at the window, phone pressed to his ear, shoulders rigid with tension. He was already dressed, dark jeans, a white button-down rolled to his elbows. Even casually dressed, he looked like money and power. "What about the phone records?" Gilbert said. "Anything unusual?" He listened. Then, dig deeper. Check her work connections. Old relationships. Anyone who might have. He stopped, turned, saw her standing there. His expression flickered, guilt, maybe, or calculation before smoothing into neutrality. "I'll call you back," he said into the phone, and hung up. "Morning," Felicia said, trying to ignore the unease creeping up her spine. "Who was that?" "My head of security, Marcus Chin." Gilbert set his phone on the table with deliberate care. "He's investigating the robbery, trying to find connections." "You told him I don't know anything." "It wasn't a question." "Because you don't. Do you?" The way he asked it, flat, almost cold, made something twist in her chest. "No," she said slowly. "Gilbert, what's going on?" He moved past her into the kitchen, poured 2 cups of coffee, handed her one without meeting her eyes. "Marcus found something. Your phone, the one that was stolen, it's been active. Someone's been accessing your accounts. Email, bank, social media." Ice flooded Felicia's veins. "What?" "They've been looking for something. Going through your files, your messages. Whatever this is, someone thinks you have information they need." He finally looked at her, and his eyes were the cold ones from their first meeting in his office. "The billionaire. The stranger. So I need you to think very carefully. Is there anything at all, that someone might want from you? Work files? Personal information? Something you saw or heard?" "I'm an insurance claims processor." The words came out sharper than intended. "I file paperwork and deny claims and eat lunch at my desk. I'm nobody, Gilbert. I'm..." "Stop saying that." His voice cracked like a whip. "Stop saying you're nobody. Clearly someone thinks you're somebody." "Well, they're wrong." Felicia set down her cup, coffee sloshing. "I don't have anything. I don't know anything. I'm exactly what I look like. Invisible. Forgettable. So whoever is doing this, they have the wrong person." Gilbert stared at her for a long moment. Then, "Or you're lying." The words hung in the air like a grenade with the pin pulled. "What?" Felicia's voice came out barely above a whisper. "I said, or you're lying." Gilbert's jaw was tight. His hands clenched at his sides. "Maybe you do know something. Maybe you're involved in something. Maybe." "Maybe what, Gilbert?" Anger surged hot through her chest, burning away the hurt. "Maybe I orchestrated having a gun put to my head? Maybe I planned to meet you? Maybe this is all some elaborate scheme. I don't know." The words exploded from him. "I don't know, and that terrifies me, because 8 years ago I trusted someone completely and she destroyed me. And now I'm here with you, feeling things I swore I'd never feel again, and someone is targeting you and I don't know why." And he ran both hands through his hair, the gesture violent. "And I'm afraid. I'm afraid you're in danger. I'm afraid you're lying. I'm afraid I'm being played again. I'm afraid. You're afraid to trust me." Felicia's voice was dead calm, deadly calm. "That's what this is really about. Someone is threatening me, and your first instinct isn't to protect me. It's to suspect me. That's not fair. Isn't it? The shout tore from her throat. You say you care about me. You hold my hand. You kiss me. Her voice broke. You make me think I'm finally visible to someone. And then the second things get complicated, you turn into exactly what the headlines say. Cold. Ruthless. Someone who sees people as threats instead of what? Gilbert stepped closer, his eyes blazing. Instead of the woman I'm falling in love with? Is that what you want me to say? That I'm terrified because I'm falling for you, and I don't know how to do that without getting destroyed again. The confession should have been beautiful. Instead it felt like a weapon. You can't love someone you don't trust, Felicia said. And each word was a nail in a coffin. And you don't trust me. You're so locked in your trauma with Claire that you're seeing betrayal where there isn't any. I'm not her, Gilbert. I'm not. How do I know that? The question came out raw, desperate. How do I know you're not exactly like her? Playing a role, waiting for the right moment to. The slap came before either of them saw it coming. Felicia's palm connected with his cheek. Not hard, but sharp enough to echo in the suddenly silent kitchen. They both froze. I'm not her, Felicia said, her voice shaking. Tears streamed down her face. I'm not her, and the fact that you can't see that you'd rather believe I'm a liar than trust what we have. She choked on a sob. I spent my whole life being invisible, being nothing, and you made me think I was finally something. Someone. Worth seeing. Worth. She couldn't finish. Gilbert's hand came up to his cheek. His eyes were dark, wounded, but he didn't apologize. I can't do this, he said finally. I can't. I'm not built for this anymore. The vulnerability, the trust. I thought I could, but then don't. The words came out cold. Final. Felicia grabbed her duffel bag from where she'd left it by the door. Take me home, or I'll call an Uber, or I'll walk. I don't care. But I'm not staying here with someone who thinks I'm a threat. Felicia, wait. No. She spun on him, and the devastation in her eyes made him physically flinch. You don't get to do this. You don't get to pull me from my life, make me feel safe, make me feel seen, and then accuse me of what? Being a criminal? A liar? Whatever paranoid scenario you've built in your head. I'm trying to protect you. You're trying to protect yourself. The shout echoed through the beach house. You're so terrified of being hurt again that you'd rather push me away than risk trusting me. Well, congratulations, Gilbert. You've succeeded. You're safe. Alone. Just like you've been for 8 years. She headed for the door. Gilbert's voice stopped her. If you leave, you're still in danger. Then I'll deal with it. Felicia didn't turn around. Like I've dealt with everything else in my life. Alone. Felicia, I was wrong about you. Her voice was quiet now. Broken. I thought you were brave. That saving me meant something. But you're just a coward in an expensive suit. Too afraid of your own heart to let anyone in. The words landed like bullets. Gilbert stood frozen as she walked out. As the door closed behind her. As the sound of her footsteps faded. He wanted to go after her. Wanted to apologize, to explain, but the fear was too loud. The memories too sharp. Claire's laughter echoing in his head. God, you're so easy. Did you really think someone like me could love someone like you? What if Felicia was the same? What if this was all? His phone buzzed. A text from Marcus. Found something. You need to see this. About Ms. Martin's employer. Call me now. Gilbert's blood ran cold. What if he'd been right to suspect her? What if he'd been catastrophically wrong? Felicia made it halfway down the beach road before her legs gave out. She sank onto the sandy shoulder, duffel beside her, and let herself break. Great, heaving sobs that shook her whole body. The kind of crying that came from somewhere deep and primal. From every time she'd been overlooked, dismissed, made to feel less than. From every relationship that had confirmed her worst fear. That she wasn't worth fighting for. And Gilbert, God, Gilbert had been different. Had felt different. Had looked at her like she was the only person in the room. Like her invisibility was impossible because how could anyone not see her? But he didn't trust her. Didn't believe in her enough to fight past his own fear. Just like everyone else. Her new phone, the replacement Gilbert had arranged yesterday, buzzed in her pocket. A text from an unknown number. You should have stayed invisible, Felicia. Now you're going to wish you had. Her hands shook as she read it again. Then again. Someone was watching her. Someone knew where she was. Someone. A car engine rumbled in the distance, getting closer. Felicia stood, heart hammering, looking for somewhere to hide, to run, to. A black sedan pulled up beside her. The window rolled down. Not Gilbert. A woman. Blonde, mid-40s, expensive sunglasses, a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Felicia Martin? The woman asked pleasantly. Every instinct Felicia had screamed danger. Who are you? Someone who wants to talk. About Gilbert Mullen. About what you've gotten yourself mixed up in. The woman's smile sharpened. Get in the car, Felicia. We have so much to discuss. I'm not getting in your car. Then I'll have my associate collect you. He's less gentle than I am. The woman gestured, and a man stepped out of the back seat. Tall, scarred, the kind of person whose presence was a threat. Felicia's legs locked. Her breath came in gasps. Please, the woman said, and her voice was pure poison disguised as honey. Let's not make this difficult. You have something I need. And I always get what I need. Felicia thought of Gilbert, of his fear, his accusations, of the fact that he'd been right. She was in danger, and now she was facing it alone, just like she always had. Gilbert and Felicia's bond has shattered, and now she's facing the real threat alone. A mysterious woman wants something from her, and Gilbert is about to discover a truth that changes everything. But will he realize it in time? Gilbert's hands shook as he listened to Marcus explain. Her employer, Meridian Insurance. They've been under federal investigation for 6 months. Insurance fraud, money laundering, the whole package. Marcus's voice crackled through the phone speaker. Felicia Martin's supervisor, David Holloway, is the key witness. He's been cooperating with the FBI, providing documentation. What does this have to do with Felicia? But even as Gilbert asked, ice was forming in his veins. He knew. God, he already knew. 3 weeks ago, Holloway uploaded the evidence files to a secure server. But he made a mistake, sent a backup copy to the wrong email address. Marcus paused. Felicia Martin's work email. She probably never even opened it. Probably has no idea it's sitting in her inbox. But someone does. Someone who's willing to kill to keep that evidence from reaching the FBI. The coffee cup in Gilbert's hand slipped, shattered on the floor. He didn't notice. She's innocent, he whispered. Completely. She's a bystander who got caught in the crossfire. The robbery was supposed to look random. Grab her phone, get access to her email, delete the files. Clean. Simple. Except you walked in and... I have to go. Gilbert was already moving, grabbing his keys, his phone. Gilbert, wait. The FBI is involved now. They're sending agents to... I don't care. The shout tore from his throat. I accused her of lying. I said... His voice broke. I said I couldn't trust her. Pushed her away. And now she's out there, alone, and someone wants her dead. He hung up, dialed Felicia's number with trembling fingers. It rang, and rang, and rang. You've reached Felicia. Leave a message. Felicia, it's me. Pick up. Please pick up. I was wrong. I was so goddamn wrong. You were innocent and I... His voice cracked. Please call me back. Please. I'm coming to get you. Just please be safe. Please. He burst out of the beach house into blinding sunlight and stopped dead. Her duffel bag sat on the porch. But Felicia was gone. 15 minutes earlier, Felicia had made a choice. She'd looked at the blonde woman with her poisonous smile, at the scarred man flexing his hands like he was imagining them around her throat, at the black sedan idling on the empty road. And she'd remembered something Gilbert had said. You're not responsible for other people's blindness. You're just you. And that's enough. She'd spent her whole life making herself small, invisible, safe. It hadn't kept her safe. Maybe it was time to stop hiding. No, Felicia said. The woman blinked. Excuse me? I said no. Felicia's voice was steadier than she felt. I'm not getting in your car. I don't know what you think I have, but you're wrong. And I'm not. I'm done being afraid. The woman's smile vanished. You're making a mistake. Maybe, but it's my mistake to make. Felicia turned and ran. Not toward the beach house. Gilbert didn't want her there. Not down the road, that's where they expected her to go. Instead she ran into the dunes, into the sea grass and sandy hills, toward the ocean where maybe someone would see her, where she wouldn't be invisible anymore. Behind her, she heard shouting. Footsteps. They were coming. Her lungs burned. Her legs screamed. But she kept running because for the first time in her life she wasn't running away from something. She was running toward survival. Toward the belief that she was worth saving. Even if she had to save herself. Gilbert drove like a man possessed. His mind raced faster than the car. Every worst-case scenario playing out in vivid detail. Felicia hurt. Felicia scared. Felicia facing danger alone because he'd been too broken, too cowardly to trust her. You're just a coward in an expensive suit. Too afraid of your own heart to let anyone in. She'd been right. He'd spent 8 years building walls, convincing himself that isolation was strength, that not feeling meant not hurting, that if he never let anyone close, he'd never be destroyed again. But standing in that beach house, watching Felicia walk away, Gilbert had felt more destroyed than Claire had ever made him feel, because this time he'd done it to himself. He'd taken something real, something beautiful and terrifying and true, and he'd shattered it with his own hands, had chosen fear over faith, suspicion over trust, had chosen Claire's ghost over Felicia's living, breathing, imperfect reality. His phone rang, a number he didn't recognize. He answered on speaker, still driving. Mr. Mullen? A woman's voice, professional, clipped. This is Special Agent Sarah Chun, FBI. We need to talk about Felicia Martin. Where is she? Gilbert's voice was barely human. Do you know where she is? We have agents en route to the beach house now. Mr. Mullen, Ms. Martin is in possession of evidence related to a federal investigation. There are individuals who want that evidence destroyed, and they believe that she has it. I know, Marcus told me, but she's not at the house. She left. She's out there somewhere and... His voice broke. And I let her go. I accused her of lying. I didn't trust her. And now she's in danger because of me. Mr. Mullen, I need you to stay calm. I can't. The shout echoed in the car. I can't stay calm. I love her. Do you understand? I love her, and I pushed her away, and if something happens to her... He couldn't finish, couldn't breathe. Agent Chen's voice softened fractionally. Then help us find her. Where would she go? Friends? Family? She doesn't have anyone. The realization was a knife to his chest. She told me. She's alone. She's always been alone. And he'd promised to see her, to make her visible. And then he'd abandoned her the moment things got hard. Just like everyone else in her life. I'm almost back to the beach house, Gilbert said, taking a turn too fast. I'll find her. I have to find her. He hung up and prayed to a God he wasn't sure he believed in, to the universe, to whatever force governed second chances, that he wasn't too late. Felicia's foot caught on driftwood and she went down hard, sand in her mouth, her palms scraped raw. Behind her, closer now. You can't run forever. She scrambled up, looked back. The scarred man was maybe 50 yards away, gaining fast. The woman was on her phone, coordinating, calling someone else. More people. Felicia's phone was in her pocket. She could call 911. No signal. Of course. Middle of nowhere, surrounded by dunes. The ocean roaring so loud it swallowed sound. She was alone. But maybe that's okay, whispered a voice in her head. Gilbert's voice. Maybe broken people are allowed to find each other. Maybe we're allowed to be seen. Tears stung her eyes, mixing with sweat and fear and something fiercer. She'd been seen. For 36 hours, she'd been seen. And even if it ended here, even if Gilbert never trusted her, Even if she died on this beach, she'd been visible. She'd mattered. That had to be enough. Felicia pulled out her phone. No signal for calls, but she opened her camera. Hit record. "My name is Felicia Martin," she said, breathless, stumbling toward the waterline. "If anyone finds this, there are people after me. I don't know why. I work for Meridian Insurance. I'm nobody, but someone thinks I'm somebody. And if you're watching this, it means," her voice broke, "it means they were right. I did matter. Even just a little." She looked directly into the camera. "And Gilbert, if you see this, I forgive you. For not trusting me. For being scared. I understand. I was scared too. I'm still scared. But," tears streamed down her face, "but I'm glad I met you. I'm glad you made me visible. Even if it was just for a moment. Even if—" "Stop running." The scarred man was close now. So close. Felicia stopped the recording. Sent it to the cloud. To Gilbert's number. To anyone who might find it. Then she turned to face him. "What do you want from me?" she shouted over the waves. "The files." He was breathing hard, angry. "The email. Delete it and this all goes away. I don't even know what you're talking about. Your work email. 3 weeks ago. From David Holloway. Delete it. Now." Felicia's mind raced. Work email. 3 weeks ago. She remembered the attachment she'd never opened. The one from her supervisor's account that she'd assumed was a mistake. Meant for someone else. "I can't delete it," she said. "I don't have access to my work email on my personal phone." The man's face darkened. "Then you're useless." He reached into his jacket. Pulled out a gun. Felicia's world narrowed to that barrel. That dark circle. Death looking at her across 10 feet of sand. "I'm sorry," she thought. "Gilbert, I'm so sorry. I'm sorry I wasn't braver sooner. I'm sorry we didn't have more time. I'm sorry." A car engine roared over the dunes. Tires on sand. A black Mercedes burst into view, sliding to a stop between Felicia and the gunman. The driver's door flew open. Gilbert stepped out. And Felicia had never seen anyone look so terrified, so determined, so absolutely alive. "Get away from her," Gilbert said, his voice deadly quiet. The gunman swung his weapon toward Gilbert. "This doesn't concern you. Everything about her concerns me." Gilbert took a step forward. "You want to shoot someone? Shoot me. But you're not touching her. Not while I'm breathing." "Gilbert, no." Felicia's scream tore through the air. But Gilbert wasn't looking at the gun. He was looking at her. Only her. "I was wrong," he said, and his voice carried over the wind. "I was so wrong. You're not her. You're not anyone but you. And his voice broke. "You're everything. And I'm sorry. I'm so goddamn sorry." The gunman's finger tightened on the trigger. And in that frozen moment, Felicia made a choice. She ran not away from the danger, but toward it. Toward Gilbert. Toward the man who'd saved her life, who'd broken her heart, who'd come back anyway. Toward love even if it killed her. "Felicia, no." Everything happened at once. The gunshot, Gilbert moving, Felicia reaching him, and the sound of sirens. Finally. Screaming over the dunes as FBI vehicles poured onto the beach. The gun fired, but who got hit? Gilbert threw himself toward Felicia. The FBI arrived, and in the chaos, two people who'd chosen each other over safety now faced the ultimate question. Did they choose in time? The bullet hit sand. Gilbert's body collided with Felicia's, both of them going down hard as FBI agents swarmed the beach, weapons drawn, shouting commands that got lost in the roar of ocean and adrenaline and the thundering of Felicia's heart. She was on her back in the sand. Gilbert was on top of her, covering her body with his, one hand cradling her head, the other braced beside her shoulder. His eyes, wild with fear, dark with desperation, searched her face frantically. "Are you hit?" His hands moved over her, checking for blood, for wounds, for any sign that he'd been too late. "Felicia, talk to me. Are you hurt?" "I'm okay." Her voice came out shaky. "I'm okay." "Gilbert, you came back." "Of course I came back. His forehead dropped to hers, and she felt him trembling. Felt the fear radiating off him in waves. Of course I did. I'm so sorry. I'm so. Hands where I can see them. An FBI agent was suddenly there, weapon trained on the scarred man who was face down in the sand, being cuffed by 2 other agents. More agents poured from vehicles. The blonde woman was being dragged from her sedan, screaming about lawyers. Radios crackled. Orders were shouted. The beach that had been empty and dangerous 30 seconds ago was now swarming with federal law enforcement. But Felicia only saw Gilbert. Gilbert who'd driven back, who'd put himself between her and a gun, who was looking at her now like she was the only thing in the world that mattered. Mr. Mullen, Ms. Martin, we need you to come with us. Agent Chun appeared beside them, professional but not unkind. We need statements, medical evaluation, and we need to secure Ms. Martin's devices. Give us a minute, Gilbert said without looking away from Felicia. Sir, this is a federal investigation. I said give us a minute. The cold billionaire voice was back, the one that made people comply without question. Agent Chun hesitated, then nodded and stepped away. Gilbert carefully helped Felicia sit up. His hands stayed on her arms, like he was afraid she'd disappear if he let go. I didn't know, he said, the words tumbling out. About the files, about the investigation, about any of it. Marcus called and explained everything and His voice cracked. You were innocent. You were in danger and innocent and I accused you of being a liar, Felicia finished softly. I remember. I'm so sorry. His hands tightened on her arms. I'm so goddamn sorry. You were right. About all of it. I was a coward. I let Claire's ghost dictate my life for 8 years. And when I met you, when I started feeling again, I panicked. Chose fear over trust. Chose my walls over. He stopped. Started again. Over you. Felicia's eyes burned with tears. You came back. Of course I came back. He cupped her face in his hands, thumbs brushing away the tears that spilled over. Felicia, I drove away from you thinking I was protecting myself, that if I just stayed alone, stayed closed off, I'd be safe. But the moment you were gone, his voice broke completely. The moment you walked out of that beach house, I realized the only thing I was protecting was my fear, not my heart, because my heart was walking away with you. Gilbert, I love you. The words came out raw, certain. I know it's been 2 days. I know it's insane. I know I have no right to say it after what I said to you. But I love you, and I'm terrified. And I'll probably mess this up 100 more times because I'm broken and I don't know how to do this. But he leaned his forehead against hers. But I want to try, if you'll let me, if you can forgive me for being so. Felicia kissed him, cut off his apology, his fear, his self-recrimination with her mouth on his. Kissed him like he'd saved her life because he had, in more ways than one. Kissed him like she was choosing him, mess and all, fear and all, broken pieces and all. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, Felicia said, I forgive you. Gilbert made a sound, half sob, half laugh. Just like that. Just like that. She touched his face, traced the line of his jaw. Because I know what it's like to be so scared of being hurt that you hurt yourself first. I know what it's like to build walls. And I know. Her voice softened. I know what it takes to tear them down. I don't deserve you. Maybe not. But you're getting me anyway. She smiled through her tears. Besides, you did throw yourself in front of a gun for me. That counts for something. I'd do it again. He said it with such fierce certainty that her breath caught. Every time. For the rest of my life. I'd choose you over safety every single time. Then choose me now, Felicia whispered. Not because I'm in danger. Not because you feel guilty. Choose me because you want to. Because I'm worth choosing. Gilbert stared at her, and she watched something fundamental shift in his eyes. The last wall crumbling, the last defense falling away. You're worth everything, he said. Worth the risk. Worth the fear. Worth learning how to trust again. He kissed her forehead, her cheeks, the corner of her mouth. Worth building a life with if you'll have me. I'll have you. Felicia laughed, giddy and terrified and completely, utterly happy. Broken pieces and all. Broken pieces and all, he echoed. 3 hours later, they sat in an FBI field office, giving statements. Felicia learned that she'd been an accidental witness to a massive insurance fraud scheme. That the files in her email files she'd never even opened contained evidence of embezzlement, money laundering, and racketeering. That David Holloway, her supervisor, had been working with the FBI for months and had sent her those files as insurance, a backup in case something happened to him. You were never supposed to be involved, Agent Chen explained. But when Holloway died in what looked like an accident 2 weeks ago, died. Felicia's hands went cold. Car crash. We believe it was staged. And someone knew he'd sent files to your email. They needed to retrieve them before we could. Chen's expression was grave. You're lucky to be alive, Ms. Martin. If Mr. Mullen hadn't intervened. He saved my life, Felicia said quietly. Twice now. She glanced across the room where Gilbert was giving his own statement, his eyes constantly drifting to her, checking that she was okay, that she was still there. When they finally finished, signed papers, gave phone records, agreed to testify if needed, it was past midnight. Gilbert drove them back to the city in exhausted silence, his hand never leaving hers. Where are we going? Felicia asked as he passed the turn to her apartment. My place, if that's okay. He glanced at her. I don't want you alone tonight. Don't want to be alone tonight. But if you'd rather. Your place is perfect. Gilbert's penthouse was exactly what she expected. Glass and steel and money. 42 floors above Charleston with a view that made her dizzy. But it was also empty, impersonal. A showroom instead of a home. I know it's cold, Gilbert said, reading her expression. I didn't want it to feel like home. Didn't want to get attached to anything. And now, he pulled her close, wrapped his arms around her. Now I want to fill it with you. Your books. Your terrible succulent that's barely alive. Your laugh. Your presence. I want it to feel like home because you're in it. Felicia tilted her head back to look at him. Is this you asking me to move in after knowing me for 2 days? No. He smiled. Really smiled, the expression transforming his entire face. This is me asking if someday when you're ready you'd consider it. Consider building something with me. Consider, he took a breath. Consider letting me love you the way you deserve. Visibly, loudly, completely. Her heart swelled so full it hurt. Ask me again in a month. And you'll say yes? Ask me again in a month and find out. Gilbert laughed and kissed her, deep and thorough and full of promise. 1 month later, Felicia stood in Gilbert's kitchen. Their kitchen now, her books on the shelves, her succulent on the windowsill, thriving under her attention. Her laughter echoing off the walls, and watched him attempt to make breakfast. You're burning the eggs? She said, trying not to laugh. I'm not. He looked down at the pan. Okay. I'm burning the eggs. She hip-checked him away from the stove, took over, added cheese and chives and turned the mess into something edible. He watched her with an expression that still made her blush, like she was performing miracles instead of scrambling eggs. What? She asked. Just memorizing this. He pulled her away from the stove, turned off the burner, wrapped his arms around her waist. You, here, happy, real. I'm very real. She kissed his jaw. And very here, and very. In love with me? His voice was tentative, hopeful. They hadn't said it yet. Not since the beach. Both of them too scared, too cautious, too aware of how fragile new love could be. But standing in their kitchen, safe and seen and chosen, Felicia found the words easy. So in love with you, she said. Completely, terrifyingly, forever in love with you. Gilbert's smile was blinding. Good, because I'm buying you a ring. She blinked. What? Not now, not yet, but soon. He cupped her face. Because I spent 8 years alone, Felicia. 8 years thinking I was safer that way. And then you walked into my life or I walked into yours and everything changed. And I don't want to waste any more time. Don't want to wait to build a life with you just because society says we should. Gilbert, I'm not asking yet, he said quickly. I'm telling you, so you know, so you can prepare. So when I do ask, his voice softened, you won't think it's too fast. You'll know I mean it. Felicia's eyes burned. Ask me now. What? Ask me now. She grabbed his hands. Because I don't want to wait either. Because life is short and dangerous and we almost lost each other and... She laughed through tears. And I want to say yes. I want to choose you. I want to build something messy and imperfect and real. Gilbert stared at her. Then he dropped to one knee right there in the kitchen. No ring, no plan. Just him and her and the morning light streaming through the windows. Felicia Martin, he said. His voice steady despite the tears in his eyes. Will you marry me? Will you let me spend the rest of my life making sure you know you're seen, you're valued, you're loved? Will you... His voice cracked. Will you choose me? Every day? Even when I'm scared? Even when I mess up? Yes. The word came out clear. Certain. Yes, yes, yes. He stood, lifted her, spun her around while she laughed and cried and held on to him like he was her anchor, her home, her forever. When he set her down, she cupped his face and said, I just wanted to call an Uber that night. Just wanted water and to get home safe. And instead you got me, Gilbert said. Instead I got you. She kissed him softly. Best wrong turn I ever made. 6 months later, Felicia stood in Maria's coffee shop, the place where they'd had their first real conversation, and watched Charleston's most feared billionaire nervously adjust his tie. Stop fidgeting, she said, smiling. You look perfect. I want this to be perfect. Gilbert reached for her hand. You deserve perfect. I don't need perfect. She squeezed his fingers. I just need you. They'd chosen the coffee shop for their wedding. Small, intimate, just 20 people who mattered, Agent Chun, who'd become a friend, Marcus, who'd become more than an employee, Maria, who'd cried when they asked to use her shop, and a handful of others who'd proven that family wasn't always blood. Felicia's parents had come, had apologized, awkwardly, incompletely but genuinely, for years of not seeing her. She'd forgiven them, though the relationship was still being rebuilt, one careful conversation at a time. But standing here now, in the place where Gilbert had first told her his story, where she'd first believed she might be worth loving, Felicia felt nothing but joy. Ready? Gilbert asked. So ready. The ceremony was simple, beautiful. They wrote their own vows. Gilbert promised to trust her, even when fear told him not to see her every day in all the ways she deserved to be seen. Felicia promised to be brave, to take up space, to believe she was worth choosing, because he'd shown her she was. When they kissed, the small crowd erupted in applause. And Charleston's most feared billionaire, who wasn't feared anymore, who'd softened in all the ways that mattered, held his wife close and whispered, Thank you for calling an Uber that night. Felicia laughed. I never did call one. Thank God, Gilbert said. Thank God you didn't. They walked out of the coffee shop into Charleston's sunshine. Hand in hand, two broken people who'd found healing in each other, who'd learned that the worst moments could lead to the most beautiful lives, who'd discovered that sometimes love finds you when you're just trying to survive, and sometimes that's exactly when you need it most. Thank you so much for watching my story all the way to the end. Your support means everything. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel and drop a comment below. I'd love to hear your thoughts.